is Chidanand from Kratz Infotech NG, and I welcome you to this short demo on Jenkins. Jenkins distributed build to bring up and connect a Linux agent. If you watched my previous video, this is a kind of extension of my previous video. What I did in my previous video was I went into the details of what exactly is Jenkins distributed build, what is the use case where you would need a Jenkins Master, which is running on a pretty powerful machine, but still what is the use case where you would need that to be connected to various other agents which are running on different operating systems or platforms. And also what I demonstrated in my previous video was I brought up a Jenkins Master on a Windows node and I connected it to another agent which I also brought up on the same Windows node. What I want to do this time around is spin up an Ubuntu box. Ubuntu is a flavor of Linux. I would spin up an Ubuntu box and then connect that with my Jenkins Master so that any job that requires Linux to be used as an underlying platform for building, compiling, or any of those stuff can be delegated to this Ubuntu or a Linux agent. Since I do not have too many systems to play around with, what I want to do is I have one Windows box on which I've got my Jenkins Master running. On the same box, I will use some virtualization technology to spin up an Ubuntu box. For all practical purposes, this can be viewed as a separate machine which has got Ubuntu running on it, and it has got connectivity between that can be established between him and my Jenkins Master, and a set of credentials which will allow me to log into this Ubuntu box. The steps that I will be showing will all be the same in either of those cases. Alright, let me then get started. To bring up my Ubuntu Linux box, what I've used is something called as Vagrant. Vagrant is a wonderful tool from HashiCorp, and you can specify whatever operating system that you want to bring up in terms of a simple configuration file like this. And if at all you have any virtualization tool installed on top of your machine, Vagrant will use that and then spin up appropriate boxes. So this is a simple Vagrant file, and if you've seen here, I'm using Ubuntu 16.04 image to spin up my box. Alright, my box is already spun up, and one other thing is I also specify an IP address. So this is an IP address that I've specified, wherein on my same Windows box I'm actually spinning up another Ubuntu instance with a separate IP address. This is just because I do not have too many machines. Alright, so I've already spun up those particular thing, and if at all I open up a command prompt and I say Vagrant status. Alright, so I have an Ubuntu box which is already running. So let me try to ping and see if this is the same IP address that I've configured. Ping 192.168.50.50. I think this is the IP address that I've specified for my box. So I'm just trying to see if at all this VM is reachable on this particular IP. Okay, wonderful. It is indeed reachable. So let me get into this box. Vagrant SSH. The name of my box is Ubuntu. Alright, so I got into my Ubuntu box. So home Vagrant present working directory is home Vagrant. Alright, so this is the agent box. You can visualize like this is a separate box. Alright, so what I do first is let me go ahead and create a new user. Alright, so let me go ahead and create a new user using this particular command. Sudo add user, any name of the user that you want to. So for me, this works. Jenkins -user is the user that I want to create. So sudo add user. Okay, I'm going to enter a new password. This is for this particular user that I'm creating. So let me put that in again. Full name, I don't want to give any name. I don't want anything else. Is this correct? Yes. Alright. So the new user has been created. So let me try to get into that user. Sudo su Jenkins-user. Alright, so who am I? Jenkins user, CD and PWD. Okay, so I created a new user. The name of the user is Jenkins underscore hyphen user, and a credential is also there for this user. I know the credential. So this is all that I need to do from my particular Ubuntu box. Now what I'll do is I will try to create a pair of SSH keys and somehow associate one of those keys with this particular user, because for those of you who know Linux, the most preferred way for anybody to get into a Linux box is SSH keys. You really do not want to give out the username and credentials and stuff like that. So let me go ahead and create a pair of keys and associate one of the keys with this particular user. There are various ways to create this key, but what I prefer is a Git way of doing it. So these keys can be created from anywhere and then later injected in or added into this particular user or associated with this particular user. So what I have here is a Git that I'm opening up on my Windows box. It doesn't matter from wherever you want to create these keys. All right. So I'm going to use this particular command ssh keygen and create a pair of keys. You can use any other key generators for creating this user. There's a putty key generator also can be used, but what I prefer is this way, where I create a pair of keys. So before that, let me check where am I. I want to create this key in a particular location. mkdir Jenkins user keys. Jenkins user keys. All right. So I'm in the E folder or E drive of my Windows box, and under Jenkins-user keys, that is the folder that I've created. So let me go ahead and create my keys here. SSH keygen -m PEM. Alright, so what is the name that you want to give for your keys? Okay, so I'll just give it as Jenkins-user. Alright, do I want a passphrase? No, I don't want any passphrase. Alright. So if you see here in the same folder, a pair of keys is created. One is the public key, the one with the .pub, and the one with the without anything is the private key. Alright, the key is created elsewhere on some other box. Now what I want to do is I want to associate this particular key with Jenkins user, which is running on my Ubuntu box. So what I'll do is I will use this command ssh copy id -i Jenkins-user. Now Jenkins-user is the name of the key that I've created here. So I will copy this key. Where do I want to copy this key, or who is the user with whom I have to associate this key is Jenkins user on this box. If you remember, this is my Ubuntu box. Who am I? Okay, this is the Jenkins user. If I go to his home directory, home Jenkins user, okay, ls-al. Alright, except for bash rc up.profile and bash logout, nothing else is created on this Ubuntu box. Now from somewhere else, I'm going to inject a keys to this particular user, or to be associated with this particular user. Of course, I would need to know the credentials of this user before I kind of do that. So let me just go ahead and try to do that. SSH copy ID and 192.168.50.50 is my box IP address. So I'm here, this is my keys. So from this particular machine, I'm going to paste this command ssh-copy id -i Jenkins user is the name of my keys. This could be anything, and where do I associate that with, or whom should I want that to be associated with? Jenkins-user at 192.168.50.50. Now what this will try to do is, which will try to copy the keys onto that particular Ubuntu box. Now it is asking me for credentials. Do I have the right kind of credentials? Because the user, when I created, all that it asked for was a simple username and password. So I'll have to type in that same password so that I have the right kind of stuff. So the keys has been added. Now let me go ahead and alright, now if you see before, now there is something called as .ssh folder that is created. So I didn't create this. This was created by my ssh copy command. So if I go into this .ssh folder, you will find an authorized key. So if we do a cat of this authorized keys, you will find that the key that we created earlier has been associated with this particular user. However, let me check if I'm able to actually log in from my different box. Okay, I need to use this keys. Keys is an alternate way of, instead of specifying the username and password, keys is what you would want to pass along. Okay, now let me see if I can actually log into this box using this particular keys. All right, so this is the command that I'm going to use. All right, so this is from my Windows box. So I'm just checking if I can log into my Ubuntu instance by specifying the keys. All right, there you go. I was able to log into that particular Ubuntu box without really asking for any credentials. The reason being that I already got a pair of keys. I've associated that keys. So whatever user that is associated with that keys, using that credentials, I've already been logged into this box. Alright, so now this means that I've got my keys, I've got my user, I've got my keys associated, and these keys are there in this folder. Now what I want to do is I want to associate Jenkins with these keys, so that Jenkins can use these keys and log into this particular Ubuntu box with this particular IP address. So when Jenkins logs into this box with this key, Jenkins will get the same sort of credentials that is associated with our Jenkins-user. So let me now log into my Jenkins box. So my Jenkins box, which is running on my Windows machine. Okay, I logged into my Jenkins box. Now first and foremost, what I want to do is I want to put out all the keys that I kind of created earlier. So manage Jenkins, not manage Jenkins, credentials. Okay, Jenkins. Alright, so let me go ahead and add a credential here. Now this is required because the keys that I created elsewhere will have to be actually imported into Jenkins, and in such a way that it is there for somebody to use it, but it should not be visible for others. That's why you have Jenkins credentials. So add credentials. So what is that I want to add up? I want to add up Jenkins username with a private key. Alright, so ID, in case you want to use this in your pipeline script or something, this ID is required. For all practical purposes, this is not required, but still I will specify ID as Jenkins user. Okay, now what is the username of this particular user? It surely is Jenkins_user. And what is the private key? Okay, if you remember, I created a pair of keys. All right, now pwd, there is Jenkins e drive Jenkins user key. So let me just bring it up. E drive Jenkins user keys. Alright, these were the keys that I've created. So one is the public key, one is the private key. So somehow I have to copy the contents of these keys onto my Jenkins box. Alright, so Jenkins user private key, let me go ahead and enter directly. Add. So what I want to do is I want to copy the contents of my private key. So I'll pause the video for a minute. I'll just copy and then I'll get back. So what I did was I opened this private key. Sorry, where was it? I opened this private key and then I copied the content onto a notepad and I have pasted that out here. Alright, if there's any extra characters or new line characters, just remove. So this is my private key. I'm directly entering my private key, and the private key is meant for some Jenkins user, which we'll figure out where to use it later on. Alright, so I've entered the credentials of the Jenkins user. Let me go back to my Jenkins and then try to add a new node. Does it need any plugins or something like that? Nothing is required because this is the core functionality which is there without any plugin, or any plugin that is required is by default available on your machine. Alright, so manage nodes. Alright, so I have one master node, a Windows node that I created earlier, but I don't want it anymore, so I've disconnected that. So let me add a new node here. Okay, what is the name of the node that I want to give? Any name for my node? So I'll give them as, give it as Ubuntu node, permanent agent. Alright, so what is the description? Not required, but let me just copy and paste this. Ubuntu no. Number of executors, how many jobs can we run on that machine parallelly, or sorry, simultaneously? One is good. Remote root directory. Now what directory on the remote machine? If you remember my Windows stuff, I've created a folder. Now something similar has to be done on this machine. So I go back to my Jenkins user. This is my Linux box, home Jenkins user. So what I'll do is let me make a folder here called agent. No, let me make it as Jenkins agent folder. Alright, so agent folder. Now home Jenkins user / agent folder. This is the folder that I will pass along as the home directory for my Jenkins agent. Okay, it's got the right kind of permissions. Alright, so remote root directory is going to be this guy. So this is what will be used as a folder where all the jobs that is delegated to my agent will have their subsequent workspaces, and whatever job specific information that is present would all be created on this particular folder. Label, very very important. I'm going to give the same name as the label. Use this node as much as possible. Not really. Only build jobs with label expression that matching this node. Alright, now comes the tricky part. How do we want to launch your Jenkins? Sorry, other thing that I forgot was on this box. Do I have Java installed? I better have it installed. So Java -version. Okay, so I have JDK 1.8 that is already installed on this box. Nothing else is there on this Ubuntu. Alright, so how do I want my agent to be launched? Okay, there are various ways in which we can configure it. Alright, so what I prefer is launch agents via SSH. This is what I would want. Okay, and now what is the host, or what is the IP address of that machine from where you want to run this particular agent? So if you look at my vagrant file, this is my agent IP address. This is the IP address of my Ubuntu box where I want the agent to be running. So this is my IP address. In case you're on a fully qualified domain, you have a DNS name, you can give that as well. Now credentials. If you remember, I created a credential called Jenkins user, which has got the SSH keys of that particular user. So I'm going to use that. Host key verification strategy. Now, if at all you had your Jenkins Master, which is also running on Windows, which is also running on Linux, there are all these known host kind of a thing that you can kind of use. But in our case, I have my Jenkins Master, which is running on Windows. So I don't want any verifying strategy and all this stuff. So this should be good. Alright, if at all I want any advanced stuff that has to be chosen, so I will go ahead and choose all that, but I don't want anything else because I have the keys, and that keys is sufficient for me, for my Jenkins Master, in order to connect to this particular Jenkins agent and then try to see if everything works well. And also this is the folder, and the user with which Jenkins will log in, the master will log in, has got permission into this particular folder. Alright, so that is all that is required. Keep this agent. This is fine for now. Okay, there's some other important topics in here, but I'll come to that in a bit. Alright, moment of truth. Let me check if at all everything is looking good, because I think I've configured everything right, but still I need to really figure out if this really works. Alright, so let me click on my Ubuntu node. By default, this will not come up unless and until you ask him to come up, because that's the configuration we have chosen. So launch agent. What my Jenkins Master does is uses the SSH keys, takes the IP address that I've provided and the user credentials that is provided, and tries to get into the box and then try to connect and then bring up the agent. So everything looks good. So my Ubuntu agent is up and running. As simple as this. Now that my agent is up, let me just go ahead and try to put up a job. The steps to bring up various agents are different, but the way you're going to put up a job and delegate the job to that particular agent is pretty much the same. So let me bring up a job called Ubuntu Agent job. Right, let me say it's a freestyle project. Okay, so now I would need some repository which would have some content in it which can be run only on a Linux box. So on my repository, my GitHub repository, I have a repository called Echo Shell, and there's a shell script in this repository. It's a simple bash script that is there, but this would definitely not run on Windows. Okay, that is the reason why I would want to delegate this job to be run on my Ubuntu box. So let me go to this repository, grab the source code URL. Alright, so what is the source code of this repository? It's going to be this guy. Do I need any credential? This is a public repository, so in all possibilities I don't need the credential, but doesn't hurt if I can give one of these credential. So I'll probably specify this. Let it be master, doesn't matter. How do I build that stuff? Okay, now though I'm putting up the job on my master, I know that I'm going to get this job to my Linux box. So what I want to do is execute a shell script. So what is that I would want to run in my repository once everything gets pulled properly to my Linux agent or my Ubuntu agent, hello.sh. So just before that, I will just do a change mode 777. Hello.sh is the name of my script, and this will happen assuming my source code gets pulled in, and / hello.sh. This is how I would run my application. Alright, so now how to verify that this runs or that gets configured to be run on the Ubuntu agent. Okay, so now I would want to restrict where this project can be run. I want to run this on my Ubuntu node. Alright, so this is all that is required. However, I know for a fact that this job would fail. So let me just go ahead and verify that. So build now. Okay, so though we are putting up the job on the Jenkins Master, we all know that the job is delegated to get into my Ubuntu node. Great. Now this job failed. So what is the reason why it failed? It is trying to execute Git on my Ubuntu box, but I think I have Git installed on this machine for sure because it's Ubuntu box. Git is there. Okay, there's already a Git. Git is there in user bin Git. All right, and if you look at the error, it is saying that git.exe. Now what is happening is the tools that we have set out for my Jenkins Master is on my Windows box. So git.exe is what it is trying to run on my Linux box, but unfortunately on my Linux box you don't really have to run git.exe. So any tool that is specific for the agent that you're configured should also be properly configured before we assume that things would go well. So let me come back to my project, or let me come back to my Jenkins. Let me go to my node and let me go to my Ubuntu node and try to fix that. Manage nodes. Okay, Ubuntu node, and then configure. Alright, so if you see here, this is where we had configured the Ubuntu node. If you see here, there's a small section of this called node properties. So in case if you have any properties that is specific to the node that has to be modified, will have to be changed here. Okay, in case you don't know where the other properties are there for my Jenkins Master, if you go to manage Jenkins, if you go to global tools configuration, alright, so this is where you specify all the tools for your Jenkins Master. Either you can specify here or you can put that in your path of your Jenkins user. Alright, so if you see here, I've specified git.exe because this master is running on Windows. So that is why git.exe makes sense. But for my Jenkins agent, which is running on my Ubuntu box, definitely that doesn't make sense. Alright, let's go ahead and change that part of it. Configure. Alright, so user tools location. Alright, so add tools. So this is the Git tool that is asking me, because I had three different tools that is there on my Jenkins Master. One is for Maven, one is for SonarQube. So let's try to change the location of my Git. So I'll have to go to my Linux box and see which is the Git. So user bin Git. This is the path on my Linux agent. So this is what I'll have to specify, right? So only the tools that is different compared to anything else that is there on the master can all be added here and changed. So for now, if it's a Windows box, I wanted to go to the default Git.tool, but for this particular Git default, but if the agent is going to be different, if the agent is going to be Ubuntu node, then instead of going to the default git.exe, don't pick that, pick /user/bin/git. Alright, save this. Let's try to run this again. Try to build now. Right, let me see if this time this goes through correctly. Alright, so the Git, it's able to hit Git because I've specified the correct path for my instance, for my Jenkins node, which was the Ubuntu one. So everything is up and running. I got change mode, hello.shell script, and this is a shell script. If you see here, this was what was there in my hello.sh. Some lines here, and it's printing the date and time. Alright, just to verify if everything is actually running correctly. Okay, this is the agent folder, which is my home folder. If I do an ls, you will find a workspace that got created. So let me get into the workspace. Right, so there you will find this Ubuntu agent job. This was the name of the job that we put up. So if I go to, sorry about that, you will find the hello.sh, the script that was able to be, we were able to pull the script from Git and then execute the script, and the output of that is shown in my Jenkins Master job. It's as simple as that, folks. How to connect an agent which is running on a Linux box, make use of this Ssh keys and configure it to your Jenkins Master, be it running on Windows or Linux. There'll be subtle changes in the way that you would do it, but 90% of the steps that I showed out here is pretty much the same that you would use if at all you need to connect your Jenkins instance and then connect it to an agent which is running on a Linux box. Alright guys, I hope you found the video informative, and as usual, if you have any questions, something doesn't run for you, hit upon any issues, kindly leave a message for me and I'll try to address it as soon as I can. Thanks for your time, and you guys have a great day.